Hi everyone, thanks for watching. If you enjoy our shows, please like our videos and subscribe to our channel. And you can support us by clicking onto our website, ageoftruth.tv.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Age of Truth TV. I'm Lucas Alexander in Copenhagen, Denmark. It's the 27th of February 2019, and our guest today is an extraordinary and controversial Italian gentleman who is an Illuminati whistleblower, an ex-member of the Masonic Executive Committee of Monte Carlo, an author, lecturer, and expert on Vatican secrets and satanic rituals. Leo Zagami. On the show today we have Leo Lion Zagami. Buongiorno, Signore Leo Zagami in Bella Roma. Welcome to the show and thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me on, and buongiorno to all your viewers in Denmark and around the world that are following this show that I know is very popular. So I'm very excited about your question time with me.
Thank you so much, and we appreciate that. And you've had such an interesting and fascinating background. Please explain how different your background was, also getting into the occult. Your family was aristocracy.
Yeah, well, not only aristocracy, but royalty, because I guess that in Italy it's quite common to find aristocrats still around the place, like in the rest of Europe, maybe not so much in Scandinavia, I guess. That you still have the royal families in charge, so maybe you don't have the whole system in place because it's been taken over by socialism. but I guess that aristocrats exist all over the place. But royal families, that's a little bit different because that implies the fact that your ancestors have been also kings and queens. Aside from that, I have also my father's side in which there were barons and marquis of the Sacred Roman Empire. So a kind of a mix. Bloodline, because from my family in Sicily I have one kind of aristocratic setup, and then instead in England, Scotland, I have a more royal one connected to the Queen of England. I would say that all this is makes me very acquainted with the world as such. No, I was acquainted with the world at a very early age. I would say that the fact that you are connected to an aristocratic bloodline already gives you instead a different perception of reality, because we have always been like that. I mean, my grandfather was of Scottish origin, but he was born in Chile, in Valparaiso, and at the same time his ancestors were all Scottish and English, and he went back to England regularly. So in the end they were like there was this link also with South America, and with the family of the Queen Mother, the Lion family, the Lord and Lady Strathmore and their castle in Glamis, Scotland. These aristocrats and these royal families, they interacted also in terms of alliances. So they merged only between themselves, and that's the way they kept their power for so long. I was born in this environment in a changing time, in a time where of course we're living this as a relic of the past, but at the same time we are ruled behind the scenes by the old institutions like the church, Freemasonry, and so on, which are connected with these royal bloodlines and are still guided by them.
Are you still guided by them?
Not myself personally. I'm a Grand Master of the strict Temple observance, and I'm a sovereign Grand Master, meaning I'm totally independent. But I am in contact. The Grand Lodge, for example, of Denmark is one of the most traditional ones and has some of the most interesting documents relating to the strict observance, which is the rite of Freemasonry, which I actually represent. But I represent it because of my bloodline, because the only Grand Master possible can be from a specific Scottish English bloodline. So I am in charge of some lodges of Freemasonry in Italy, but also abroad, that of course are different from the rest because they have applied the same revolution which I applied for myself, the one that coming out in 2006 and saying, no, this is not the way I like Freemasonry to be. I don't like this globalist nightmare. I don't like this socialist nightmare. I just want everything to be rediscussed, because I also think that the New World Order is not the way I would like to live in the future.
So how is it different from what you used to be involved in? I mean, since your early background, your childhood, I guess you were groomed to become a member of the Freemasons, and then now you say you're still a Freemason and you're still practicing this, but in a different way. But how is it different?
Well, I mean, I make this public. It's not that I'm revealing anything groundbreaking today. For my readers who have read my books, they know about the struggle internal to secret societies, which I've been participants for many years, and the fact that I still stick to have certain relations to it and to actually be involved in it directly is because it has given me the protection and the possibility to advance my own agenda and be able to defend myself against people who are very powerful. And so if you don't have a structure which is equally as powerful, you will not be able to fight them or even survive. So I know that this was one of the things that in 2006, when I came out, I soon realized, because you see, I came out of the Monte Carlo Lodge. I never, we went on after for 2 years discussing between, I denounced the whole thing publicly. There was an internal struggle. In 2008, I definitely left the whole show and brought my own order in Italy, and then went on from there independently from the rest of the New World Order setup, the network of secret society which I belong since I was 23. I just left that environment which was constricting, was imposing a plan which I didn't agree on.
So you were part of this Monte Carlo Lodge, which was called P2, the Propaganda Lodge. Is that correct?
Propaganda 2 is a lodge in itself that was officially dismantled, but still survived in Italy until the early 80s, when eventually the Italian police raided Licio Gelli's villa and then discovered this list, which was also a partial list, because the full list of 2,500 members was not given to the authorities. Only 1,000 members were revealed to the authorities. The other ones were too powerful to be revealed publicly. So it was 1993 when a family friend connected with me and wanted me to join Freemasonry in a specific knighthood order that operated already within the New World Order. I said yes. I personally started to study also the esoteric. I went very deep in it. I joined certain groups, orders, one in particular, the AA, linked to Aleister Crowley. Then there was also later on the OTO. I ended up also having a lot to do with the OTO in Sweden, Norway, and so on. So Scandinavia became my second home. I actually moved there because there was a lot of activities from the elite and also from the Satanists. So I was in this environment really curious about what was going on, because I always knew about my own, the fact that I was a chosen one in a way, gave me the privilege of the fact that they wanted to actually drag you in. It wasn't the other way around. There's a lot of people who want to become Illuminati, who are always sending emails, or they are going on the internet hoping to join some secret society that will change their life. Usually they end up very disappointed, because the majority are a bunch of charlatans who are just selling a product, or they are just secret societies which have lost the connection with the ancient mystery schools and are just portraying themselves on the internet in a way that is very outwards and very aesthetically beautiful, but not with any substance.
So you were groomed as a child to actually become somewhat a member of the Illuminati?
Well, yeah, because my grandfather was himself a member. You see, my father refused to join Freemason, but was still involved in this kind of setup, which was made of course, people with a lot of knowledge. I mean, my father himself was a great student of the occult, but also a Jung psychiatrist, disciple of Carl Gustav Jung, worked with Meyer. He was Jung's representative in Switzerland. He did all sorts of things to just understand more about the nature of the human brain, and also worked in a way that at one point annoyed the authorities. So my father was a little bit wary of getting involved with the New World Order. When they invited him to join the P2, he refused, something that I didn't do. I actually went on, joined the whole show, and then after joining, I realized that maybe at one point it wasn't really my cup of tea. But it took me 10 years from 1993 to 2003 to understand that, because I wanted to touch, feel, and see with my own eyes certain things. I didn't want to just read them on a book. And so that was very dangerous, because in the meantime, I felt victim of demonic possession. I was exorcised. There was all kinds of things that happened in my life that I describe also in my books, because they are, of course, very interesting tales now. Watching them with a certain distance, because they happened in the past, they can be interesting, but at the time I suffered a lot. I mean, I suffered persecution. I was arrested in Norway for espionage. I was tortured in Norway.
Yeah, we also want to get into that. But when you said before that you decided to join the New World Order, do you mean joining the New World Order philosophy because you became part or a member of the Freemasons?
This is not the ordinary lodge of Freemasonry. I was approached by a family friend known as Prince Alliata di Monreale, Gianfranco Alliata di Monreale. You can find him on Google. He was a politician connected to my grandfather. They were both monarchic. At one point, they were active in what was left after the war, and after Italy chose the Republic, they still for a period of time had this monarchic movement and party and went along with it. But then after joined the social democracy project, because they also were quite impressed in a way by the socialism of the North, they called it, of Scandinavia. It was quite inspirational for me, the fact that Prince Alliata told me that his favorite country was really Norway and Sweden. These were his favorite countries. Prince Alliata was a prince, and his family had been connected with my family for a long time. My grandmother, well, actually my English grandmother, Felicity Mason, known also as Incoming, which is quite famous, you can go and find on Google, and she was herself, of course, the niece of an important politician, married with my grandfather, who was the cousin of the Queen Mother. When I was called by this family friend, I still remember my father said, well, there is this guy, he would like to meet you.
The prince.
Yes, well, I mean, he said, okay, you will meet, it's in Trastevere, in this place, you can go there and meet him. When I arrived there, I mean, I felt like really in a James Bond kind of movie, because I remember still going in this house. It was made of stairs with secretaries on the side, offices, big libraries. The guy was, of course, he must have been very powerful, but also very rich, because, of course, you are in the center of Rome, not far from the Vatican, in Trastevere. You know very well Trastevere, and you go inside a place like this that is like 2 floors, and very nice. And of course, it was impressive. Then he received me in his office, and he said, Leo, we were very impressed with you from what you managed to do without any help, really, because already at age 20, I had made myself very famous in Italy, because I started at age 13 in Catholic radio, ended up being one of the inventors of the rave scene in Italy in 1988. By 1990, I had become also a record producer, and I was in the main radios in Italy as a DJ, and also in the club scene, but at a very high level. I used to draw 5,000 people each week in Rome in the rave scene. So they were very impressed with my capacity of getting people together, and of course of having done this with another name. I used the name Leo Young, not Leo Zagami, so people couldn't know that I was Leo Zagami, because my grandfather was Leopoldo Zagami. So immediately, and he was a senator, a guy who marched with Mussolini, a guy who had a big political past.
And Zagami is your real name?
Zagami is, yes, my family name from my father, but my father, of course, was the product of my grandfather, who was, as I said, a senator, Senator Leopoldo Zagami, first for the monarchic, then for the Social Democrats, died in 1974, probably poisoned, because he went against Craxi. And he was a Sicilian senator, so you can imagine, I mean, after the war, Sicily was basically totally orchestrated by those anti-communist mafia forces that made the alliance with America to let them in when they were, of course, occupied by the Nazis. So we know the story, what happened with Lucky Luciano and the whole thing, so we don't want to go into the obvious.
Was your family part of the mafia?
My family was more than that, because my grandmother was a Marchesa. She was the daughter of the Marchesa di Gregorio. So that's another level. When you are Marquis and Barons in Sicily, you are a Don. Don is... The mafia is low. They're working for you. They are just like the people who, can kiss your ring. I mean, but you are at a very high level.
So this is also above Freemasonry, right? This is Illuminati. Or what is the difference? What is the different levels?
When you talk about Illuminati, I describe as Illuminati a variety of secret society. You have a head of the Beati Paoli. Beati Paoli in Palermo, the underground caves, the capes, meeting like the KKK, and they were like the connection between the mob and the aristocrats was made in secret with people in capes. That is the kind of Illuminati I'm talking about.
Were you part of that?
Well, I became part of that kind of scenario, yes.
And would you say that you became a Satanist?
Of course, I was a Satanist, but I was more of a Luciferian. If I have to tell you the truth, I never really sympathized so much with those people who were endorsing those satanic black masses, because I was more of a Luciferian. I had a different kind of a more Gnostic view. But I must say that, of course, was Satanist. I mean, when it comes to Satanism, I was connected with Carl Abramson in Sweden, who is a friend of Anton LaVey, I had all the right connections. When Anton LaVey died, they wanted to sell me his house. The offer was made to me and to Marilyn Manson. So,
Really?
Yes, I remember it was 400,000, I think.
That is incredible. Please talk about the difference between Satanism and being a Luciferian, as you called yourself back then.
Well, yeah, because I wasn't really into evil, you see. So when I actually went into this, I went with a Gnostic prospect, a Gnostic, so a duality prospect of good and evil. In order to embrace good, you have to go through evil and all that. But these people were really worshipping evil. At one point, I understood that when I was given a specific initiation, I think it was in the 8th degree of the Ordo Templi Orientis, which I described in volume 1 of my Confessions, the instructions given to me talked about human sacrifice, child sacrifice. At that point, I said, okay, I draw a line here. It's not happening with me. But I knew that they wanted to drag me into that thing, and they invited me more than once, until at one point I, of course, became a little bit suspicious for them. So the only way I could actually avoid that kind of scrutiny was to join and to become a leader of a Christian Gnostic current like the Rosicrucians of the Fraternitas Rosicruciana Antigua, which also at one point were in Denmark present, but all over the world. They were created by a gentleman called Arnold Krumheller around 100 years ago, and they come from the tradition of Franz Hartmann and the real Rosicrucians. So the Rosicrucians was a way for me to actually still be involved in this whole thing, but without going to the extreme. But still, I had an eye on it. The people in the lodges where I was part of, they were doing these things.
And you knew from the beginning Or was that something you were made aware of, that they were actually performing these very dark satanic rituals and child sacrifice?
Well, you see, I knew that something really dark was going on already in the early 90s when I was living in the Jewish ghetto in Rome. There was something really dark going on.
Did it take place inside of the churches?
It involved both the church and also members of the Jewish faith. The whole thing was really strange, and I mean, at one point I understood that there was this, the evil of child sacrifice was present. I realized it, I think, at one point, but I didn't really think that Freemasonry could have any links to it. And in reality, I must say, within Freemasonry, I also found people who actually were thinking like me against Satanism. But then in the end, I saw that there was too much compromise going on. Because if you start tolerating these Satanists in your lodges, then in the end they take over the show, because they are black magicians, and so they have a lot of power. They have maybe more insights than the average Masons, who I tell you, I mean, they are very ignorant. Most of them, it's a social club, that's it, in Denmark especially. I mean, I remember I have, I think, a Danish newspaper somewhere here in my archives, from 2000 and maybe 2, when I was living in Oslo. I got hold of this newspaper because there was this guy, this Freemason, this English Freemason, who had managed to live in Denmark and fraud half of Freemasons of Denmark with his things. I don't know, I mean, this guy he managed to get to the high levels in Freemasonry in Denmark. And apparently he was instead some kind of con man. And I still remember, I have this article somewhere. I might pull it out and do a photo and send it to you. But in any case, Freemasonry it was a way for me to travel around the world always, as other secret societies, as also my work for the Fraternità Esecutivo Antigua, and always have some links also with the OTO. Wherever I went, I mean, if I was in Reykjavik, if I was in Stockholm, if I was in Oslo, if I was in St. Petersburg, Moscow, if I was anywhere in the world, I had a link to a word that was very influential culturally, because, I mean, it involved musicians, poets, writers. It never got boring, that's for sure.
A lot of people are Freemasons and they would not know anything about these things, and they're on a different level. And I think a lot of people would be very upset if they hear that some people are saying that satanic rituals are happening.
I would say that it's not correct to say there is satanic rituals inside the Masonic order, absolutely. What they do, they simply recruit the Freemasons from that particular level onwards, or from certain lodges which they are interested because they have the right candidates, and then into the side show that goes on in these other secret societies. That's where Satanism goes on.
Okay, so they recruit them and take them into another, let's say, segment of it, a different type of order which is more elitist?
Completely different. I mean, it can be different. It can be, I mean, it could be the Louis de Cohen, it could be the Martinis, it could be the certain forms of Golden Dawn, even if some are good, some are bad, because, I mean, there is different people who are in charge of them, or many other groups that really recruit from Freemasonry.
And would that be the Illuminati, or what we call the Illuminati?
They're not immediately the Illuminati, because they themselves have a pyramid within their own group. For example, in Amorc, you don't become an Illuminati until you are an 11th degree. It will take you many years to get to that level. And then you are just giving it plain sight. Illuminati said, 222. So, I mean, and in other groups, you have to go through all these various degrees until at one point you're brought into that reality. Then you have, you see, the occult side of the Illuminati, and then you have a more social side of the Illuminati.
So there is a more social side of the Illuminati. It's not all just negative.
No, not all negative. There is a more social and philanthropic, but mostly philosophic, which in a way tries to work around the values of Illuminism, no? The values that made Illuminism so important. And so they kind of act like, in a way, but they actually distance themselves from occultism because sometimes their circles are very elitarian.
So they're actually working against the more sinister part of the Illuminati segment that you're talking about.
Not all of them. Unfortunately, not all of them. Nowadays, 75% of that kind of Illuminati have been infiltrated and manipulated by the occult forces, the dark forces of the other occult groups, which as I said, I continue to call the Illuminati because nowadays that's the phrase everybody associates with this. The Western initiatic system has, from 1776, created this myth of the Illuminati. We can say that. Of course, the Illuminati existed, but soon after they were persecuted and had to go underground and manifest in many other names and forms. Because the thing that made the Illuminati of Adam Weishaupt so popular was the fact that he devised methods of infiltrating the Masonic lodges, the churches, the institutions. It was like methods of infiltration that he actually devised in his teachings, something that was unusual because Freemasonry up until then was fixated mostly with some philosophical or religious or magical questions, like Aleister and his Egyptian rite. That was very speculative magic, or otherwise you will have the Royal Arch more into the Jewish mysticism and then the Kabbalah and blah blah blah. But when it comes down to what you want to hear, the dark side, the sinister side, I think that side started really with the Illuminati of Weishaupt because it picked up from that social modality and then gradually inserted these occult elements to it. Until, they manifested 100 years later, for example, Leopold Engel and Theodor Reuss in 1880 Bayreuth in Germany. They reawakened the Illuminati, but it was already much more connected to the occult, much more darker and sinister than it had been previously, even at the time of Adam Weishaupt himself. Adam Weishaupt was mostly fixated with political intrigue, and also he wanted people to believe, for example, that you were joining a Christian organization. And so he will not give that occult outwards image of his Illuminati immediately because he didn't want people to get scared. And also of course he had representatives in the Illuminati like Aleister who were their own members and Grand Masters of their own order. So you see, he was putting together different people from different backgrounds. A guy like Count Aleister, who, by the way, was a member of my family, known as Giuseppe Balsamo. I'm descent, of course, from the side of the sister, because he didn't have children, but the sister did. And of course, we are talking about a very particular kind of guy, Cagliostro, very controversial. No? So when I heard about him when I was very young in my family, I went into my library and I started discovering books on him, and they told me his story. They described him as the black sheep of the family. I find him very inspirational in a way.
So you were very fascinated with, let's say, the dark side, the mysticism. So talk for a moment about how important the influence of Aleister Crowley was for you in your life.
First of all, the most important influence was the Catholic Church, because I was born and raised in the most traditional Catholic environment, and also in one of the most traditional Catholic areas in Italy. I went to school in Subiaco, in the monastic district, but I actually started when serving Mass. I was the head of the altar boys. I had around 22 altar boys under me. I served Mass, but at the same time, I was the son of my father, who was, like they would say in Italy, un mangiapreti, somebody who never went to Mass and was definitely somebody who knew what was going on in the Catholic Church, but also was an occultist, because my father was very much somebody who knew about the occult, even if he was a young psychiatrist and very popular.
How can you be both a Catholic and believe in God and Christianity and be an occultist and a Satanist, maybe?
But I think that Catholicism is the most pagan form of Christianity that was ever devised. I mean, it simply arrived in ancient Rome and put his umbrella on top. Christianity put the umbrella on a bunch of cults, which never really, even the most sinister ones, never really died, just went underground. And they built their own churches on each temple. But remember, here we are, I was born in Rome on the Seven Hills, in the church Policlinico Gemelli, on the hill of Monte Mars, dedicated to the god of war. This is an ancient land. As an aristocrat, my family is, I can trace my Scottish family up to 856 after Christ, when they arrived from Rome, sent by the Pope to Scotland, because, of course, the Pope wanted to get rid of them, a bit too dangerous, get the lions out of Rome. But there is still, of course, then some lions stayed in Rome.
So are you saying that the Catholic faith is built on a lie? Is that a deception for people?
Oh, no, lie. I mean, Jesus definitely was the greatest master of all time, and he embodied this great change as a prophet.
Well, if we don't talk about Christianity as a whole for a moment, but more specifically the Catholic Church, what is actually going on? That was what you were talking about.
Well, if you put it like that, then it's more understandable, because then you go to the Council of Nicaea, of course, which is the founding moment for Christianity. But it's also the moment in which a lot of real Christianity gets put aside and thrown away, because they have to implement it as a state religion. Now, real Christianity, that gets transmitted in secret teachings. It becomes something a little bit more underground, and something that still continues to this day for those who still believe in his teachings. But of course, nowadays we have an exterior facade, which is the Church of Rome, which is completely corrupt and doesn't deserve any respect from anybody. So even myself, I feel like, I don't know why they haven't yet kicked me out, because I've been able to really criticize them in their faces over and over again.
Yes, that is extraordinary, isn't it? That nothing has really happened to you. If you were on that high-ranking level that you are talking about, didn't it have any consequences for you over the years?
Of course, it had consequences. I was, as you would say in America, I was kicked ass in Norway, and I was accused of espionage. After I came out with my blog in 2006 and I started to denounce what was going on, which was unheard of back then. I mean, wow, this guy from Rome is saying there's a bunch of pedophile rings that control the Vatican? No, it's not possible. Oh, no.
So was that the reason? Because they took you to prison in Oslo. I
was arrested for espionage. I mean, the PSD... espionage is a very serious accusation. It's not just an accusation. The accusation was lifted in February 2010. I wasn't in Norway anymore. Thanks to the US State Department, I managed to escape Norway, and I was not in prison, fortunately, but I had everything confiscated. I had money, all my belongings, because I was living in Norway. Everything was confiscated and frozen for 2 years. I was living out of a bag, which I had a few things that I managed to get before, just getting on a plane and literally escaping, and very much fearing that I will even be arrested while I was going on the plane, because they already did that years earlier. They
arrested you previously, before the event in Oslo?
I was in Oslo when I started my war against the OTO in 2003, 2004. And before I went public with it, I went public because I was threatened with my life. I mean, the OTO, I had worked for the Rosicrucians of the Society Rosicruciana in Anglia to get rid of the Satanists within their fraternity. This was an investigation that was given to me by John Hamill, the Director of Communication in UGL, together with Robert Gilbert, who was in charge of the Quo Dei Coronati Lodge at that time, which is the most important lodge of research, Masonically speaking. So I went into this investigation. I managed to find the right evidence to expose the ringleader that actually was using blackmail, sex slaves, and all kinds of things to infiltrate this organization. He was called Simon Kane.
He was the leader of the lodge that you were part of.
In London at the time, the tabula rasa, he became the leader of, but then he was infiltrating the SRIA, and I was in charge because I was inside the OTO, but when I realized how it was, I became just a spy to check out the whole scenario and report it to other people, because at that point I understood how dangerous they were, especially after they initiated me into the higher levels. When I understood these people were into child sacrifice, sexual depravity, pedophile, all kinds of things, and they were actually connected in secret with the pedophiles of the Catholic Church. That was really shocked me, because you see, in all this, I was always coming from a very Catholic background, and the moment I saw that in Sweden there was Friends of John Paul II. I don't want to make the name because, of course, this is a bit reserved. Many years have gone by. But this guy was part of the Illuminati dark forces that were present in Scandinavia and that were headed by a perverted guy who is called Nikolai de Matos Fritzwold, who now resides in South America. And he was himself related to General Fritzwold, who was in charge of I think of NATO's army back in those days even. But in any case, Fritzwold had initiated me in Oslo, and he actually had shown me that the Fraternidad Rosicruciana Antigua was actually driven by Satanists. And at that point, that's when I started to, because I had been initiated in something which then I discovered was run by ex-Nazis from the SS. The son of Krumheller together with the Satanist, and I was like, and there was linked to another group called the Fraternitas Saturni, operating also in Northern Europe and in Berlin.
Was that something you discovered in Norway, or was that something you knew already before you moved to Norway?
In Norway, I made a lot of discoveries. In Norway, I was there studying, researching, and because you see, I was also at the same time a member of Freemasonry. And I was that gave me some insight in things, and also a preparation that I guess the average New Ager or cult member doesn't have, you know.
Why did you move to Norway in the first place?
There was a problem. I mean, I heard that the problem was they were lighting up churches. That really got my attention, especially in the middle of the 90s when it started happening. I was involved with the music scene because I was a record producer. We found these people interested in bringing me to Norway. I was already interested in going to Norway because I want to understand more about this whole scene. Norway is so small that for me, infiltrating a country so naive like Norway would have been very easy.
In what way did you want to infiltrate Norway?
Well, it's not a question so much, I mean, in what way. I was given, the guys in Monte Carlo wanted to touch base with the Freemasons in Norway because they are from the Swedish Rite and they were very isolated. They don't really communicate very much with the rest of the world. They were very much in their own world. You see, the Swedish Rite is only practiced in Scandinavia. It's practiced in Sweden, it's practiced in Denmark, it's practiced in Norway, it's Iceland, partly in Finland. So the fact that they were practicing this rite, which was very particular and also Christian in nature, because it came from the strict observance, gave me an idea that maybe I will meet some Christian Freemasons. But in reality then, I discovered that the whole show was taken over by these Satanists like Eric Bogdan from Gothenburg, from the faculty there, religious faculty, and all those Satanists that were hanging out with Carl Abramson. And then there was another guy from the Dragon Rouge, what's his name, Thomas Carlson, I think, or whatever his name is, with grimoires this big, doing black magic. I became really astonished by the fact that behind this facade of Christianity, there was so much pagan and occult and satanic belief. I mean, I was in disbelief myself because, okay, I told you, I'm Catholic and the Catholics have absorbed it. But one thing is to practice Catholicism, which of course might have some dark sides, but I'm used to it. I'm used to the people worshipping in capes with bones, carrying the bones of the saint. That is a regular business in Italy. You have been here, so you know how it is. But I mean, to see these people who were instead worshipping the old Viking gods, they were sacrificing animals, and of course they were also...
They sacrifice animals, and they did that in Scandinavia.
Of course. There was, for example, this Nikolai Friswold, who was a practicing doctor, head of a clinic at that time for mental health, and he... in the night, he was a babalao and practicing what is known as palombere, that South American thing. And he was sacrificing black cats every 15 days, at least. And then he sacrificed other animals regularly, yes. I mean, the black cat was a specialty because Aleister Crowley did it, so they were all fixated.
Black cats.
Yeah, black cats, they were really into black cats. But apart from the black cats, this guy was sacrificing even cows, because he had the permission that is given to these babalaos to use the machete to chop the heads of the animals. And it's done in Cuba, it's done in South America, many parts. But he was initiated and then went back to Norway and had this. And then there was a whole following. For example, I talked about in volume 2 of my Confessions, where I talked very much about the fact that they practiced also this Amukos. Amukos was a secret society based on Tantra and Aleister Crowley, and some ancient forms of witchcraft devised in India, sorcery, the Uttara Kaula. And this happened because there was a guy called Dadaji who went to Crowley and then went to India. And then basically...
Babaji?
Dadaji.
Oh, not Babaji, okay.
I think that was his name. And basically he then went back in the 70s in the West to form a secret society based on the teaching that he had learned during his time in India. And of course he was inspired originally by Aleister Crowley. He sent him there.
How influential was Aleister Crowley in what is now called modern day Satanism?
Oh, very influential, very influential. Don't believe those who say Aleister Crowley is not a Satanist for a minute. I mean, they always try to make you this, their point, that they, that they always try to convince you that Crowley is not a Satanist because he's a Gnostic and blah, 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 blah. No, Crowley is a Satanist. I mean... He
was using Illuminati symbolism.
He went into the really dark side of the Illuminati. As I told you, the Illuminati were born in a way, and then in the time preceding Crowley, they became really dark, and with the birth of the Theosophical Society, that was the network that within all the countries of this British Empire was present. At that point, thanks to the Theosophical Society network, they were able to prey on victims, because there were also pedophiles involved. And I mean, that Krishnamurti himself was basically taken as a young boy, because he was a victim at that point of this whole Theosophical Society, which was in the hands of pedophiles, though. I mean, people don't want to admit that, but I mean...
Krishnamurti.
After Madame Blavatsky, the Theosophical Society was taken over by a guy called Charles Webster Leadbeater, who himself was a pedophile. Okay, and together, and at one point they wanted to find the Theosophical Society the ideal Messiah figure to launch into the world. So they found this Indian boy named Jiddu Krishnamurti, and then they groom him to become the leader of the movement. But at one point, Jiddu Krishnamurti, I remember the story, just faces the people who brought him to this Theosophical Society and just told them, after many years, of course, he was already, I think, in England at that point, he said, "Listen, guys, I'm not your Messiah." So he renounced to that role. But you see, all these secret societies within the Theosophical Society are all linked together. And the fact that, for example, they are linked also to figures, that are not all positive, because, of course, there is some of these occultists that are preying on young children, they are pedophiles, just as priests. And I noticed that very much there was this link between the high levels of occultism and the dark side of the Illuminati and the Catholic hierarchy. And this became, for me, really, when I was in Norway, I also saw for the first time that the clergy in Norway was participating to the lodge meetings in the lodges of the Swedish Rite in Norway, of Freemasonry, of the Der Norske Freemason Order. And that really was like, how can these people go into these lodges? And how is this possible? It was all wrong. It was all profoundly wrong.
But please, Leo, tell us and the audience, why do they need to sacrifice not only animals, but also children? Why is that necessary?
They are really obsessed with the energy of the youth, of the child, of the, like I was saying, Guido Krishnamurti was born in 1895 and died in 1986. But when he was really young, he must have been, and you have photos, you can go and search for yourself on the internet, you can see he was a really young, nice boy. And suddenly you have this pedophile that enrolls you to become part of a society that is then supporting a cultic kind of scenario, because it was very cult, the whole thing. They were starting to bring elements of the East into the West, and this will erupt then in the 1960s when the plan was to launch this whole movement, New Age, at a massive level, and of course involve gurus of all kinds from India.
The hippie movement.
Well, you were mentioning Babaji before. We can mention all kinds of gurus that finally have been unleashed on the West. You see, unleashed on the West, because the idea here is to destroy Christianity and to destroy the basis of Christianity and the values of Christianity. I know that this might sound very conservative, but I'm not a bigot by any chance. Here I'm talking about literally the plan that they are operating on this level, here on this world. And New Age, the New Age movement has been part of this plan. New Age is a phrase that was coined within the Theosophical Society and Freemasonry. It was then used for the publication of the Scottish Rite publication for the Southern Jurisdiction. New Age became that element whereby a lot of deviant sectarian activities like the OTO or temples or many others could find, cozily hiding behind the scenes instead of having to, because at that point when you have the New Age movement, the explosion of this phenomena, Beatles putting Aleister Crowley on the cover of a record and with other many figures of importance, gurus and so on. Then you have, of course, the Beat generation. I was directly involved because my grandmother was the PR person for William Burroughs and Brian Gyson. And you can find, of course, her work on the internet, and even an interview where he talks about William Burroughs, Kerouac, and all these people, and the Beat Hotel, where she was actually one of the few people that was participant to all that. But my grandmother was also a member of the British intelligence. That's why she met my grandfather. So, all these things had a different value, and she was the one in charge of during the war, and this you can go and find on Wikipedia, so I'm not making a conspiracy here, but she was in charge of decrypting secret communications between the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of Great Britain. So, a very important role.
She was an agent.
Well, she was, yes, of course. She was in charge of the intelligence. She was very clever with crypto communications and with of course with foreign languages. She knew many. She knew Russian, German, English, France. and then of course she worked also for the cinema industry later on with Fellini, Zeffirelli. That's how she came into Rome, Italy. That's how my mother was then brought up and met my father in Stromboli, and how the kind of environment was that. I mean, I was born myself in front of Fellini's assistant at the Gemelli Hospital. He was there into the room, and I was born. So I mean, Fellini, of course, but this is you can go and check my grandmother, Felicity Mason, aka Incoming, on Wikipedia. You can find that she was also part of Fellini's movie, what was it, 8½? I mean, just go and check Wikipedia.
And her name was actually Mason?
Felicity Mason, of course. That was a name.
How interesting that is her name as well.
I tell you how that came around. Felicity was first married with my grandfather, Harry Lyon Young. And so when she then she met another gentleman who was the guy who wrote the famous book, The Word of Susie Wong, Richard Mason. And then they got married, and she took on her surname. Only years later, we discovered that the marriage was faked and that she just took on the surname. So that she actually never had other marriages but my grandfather. But it was a kind of, I mean, of course, Felicity was an agent. She could change surnames as she was changing clothes, I guess, no? But
wow.
I think that people who maybe think this is a conspiracy, they can very well go to it's, you know, just write Incoming, Cumming,
and N, that is Anne.
Yes, and you will find Incoming, and you will find my grandmother next to Brian Geisen. That's she used to call Brian Geisen, the inventor of the catapult technique, her brother. But she's described on Wikipedia as a British translator, writer, and sexual theorist. Sexual theorist because, of course, she was very outspoken about it, and she even made a couple of bestsellers, The Love Habit and another book. She appeared in Fellini's, it's written here on Wikipedia, in 1963 she had a small part in Fellini's film 8 Weeks and a Half. Then she was also played the mother of George Segal in another film, and then of course she wrote The Love Quest in 1977, and she even went topless on the British tabloid The Sunday Sport. I mean, that is the kind of eccentric figure was my grandmother.
It's not a boring family you come from, that's for sure.
Absolutely not. I mean, my father himself was also very interesting because, as I said, he was a psychiatrist who really pioneered the Jung psychiatry here in Italy.
Jung,
yes, and he became the founder of an organization called GAPA, which still exists, of independent Jung analysts. And so he was also, he wrote several books. He made a research on the LSD, actually at the Sorbonne University. He was involved in all that kind of MK Ultra experimentation that went on.
He was part of the MK Ultra experimentation.
It wasn't for the US.
They brought over the Nazi scientists during Project Paperclip.
Oh, sure. But then the invention of LSD was linked to the Sandoz laboratories and the production company in Switzerland that produced it, okay? And then the experimentations that were done in the various universities, like, for example, the Sorbonne in Paris, where my father, for example, worked there, they were monitored then by the CIA abroad, like they monitor, for example, places in Sweden also. In Oslo, for example, they monitor places and then collaborated and retrieved information that was important for their project. So the experimentation of LSD, as you know, was very important in this MK Ultra scenario of experimentations.
And that was also associated with the Tavistock Institute in London, right?
Yes, I hate the Tavistock Institute also because I've been their victim. I was locked up in 2014 because I participated to the Pitchfork Revolution in Italy. I actually set it up with my organization and with my lodges, and then they wanted to stop me because I was assuming too much political power. You can go and check this also. This was public. The Forconi in Italy was a big. It was a bit like the Yellow Vest protest of today in France. We stopped Italy for approximately 3 or 4 months. But the secret police broke into my house in the morning with the carabinieri. They broke down my door, worse than what they did with my friend Roger Stone. It was just terrible for my wife, for me. And I was locked up in a mental asylum, man. And I had 3 lawyers to get out of this problem. And after 2 weeks, I eventually got out. In a way, it was good that I actually was there, because by being there, I couldn't be accused of political conspiracy against the government, and I wouldn't get in trouble legally as much as not being there.
Because they said you were mentally ill.
Yes, I mean, of course, I had announced there would be a coup. We were about to get the police on our side and to do basically take over, because my idea was to actually close the borders and to finally come out of this nightmare called Europe. I mean, we didn't want to have anything anymore to do with Europe, and I was in direct contact with Salvini.
When you say Europe, do you mean the European Union?
The European Union, of course.
But how was the Tavistock Institute involved in you being locked up in a mental institution?
Because when actually I was locked up, I was with my lawyer. We went to talk with the head, Giuseppe. I actually wrote it in my books. I think he was called Giuseppe Nicolò, the head of the institute. He admitted in front of my lawyer, so in front of witness, that he worked for the Tavistock Institute. And they have an office in Florence even. So, I mean, he admitted it. They have an office in Florence, which is actually inside within the bank building. So, I mean, banks and Tavistock seem to go hand in hand. But the problem here was this, that I had inspired people through my books the year before that to start a peaceful revolution that will then overthrow this situation. And the people took it seriously. The result of it was that, unfortunately, the Italians, as chickens as they are, I'm sorry to say, they have been castrated after the Second World War by the Allied forces because they were fascists. So this nation lives in a perpetual castrated situation in which they can't do anything, because they have the American bases controlling, they have this controlling, and the church on top of everything controlling them, because the church here is a political also, power in Italy.
And the biggest religion in the world, the Catholics.
And of course, the biggest religion in the world. The fact that actually at one point the Pope called us, the pitchforks, I mean, you can go and check on the newspaper, the Pope called us to go to St. Peter's and talk, because we were blocking. I mean, we had involved so many people around Italy in this situation that it actually became a threat to the state and a threat to the EU. So I started to receive, most of the organizers received threats and they gave up. They said, listen, if you don't give up, we're going to lock you in tomorrow morning, or this and that, or we're gonna, that kind of thing. Instead, with me, the more they were doing that, the more I was persisting, because I didn't give a damn. But at one point, the only way to stop it was to arrest me and lock me up and make me feel, officially say, this guy's insane. I mean, it's a political dissident. They did it in the Soviet Union. They did it here. I mean, of course, the difference here was that I was a public figure. I was already somebody who wrote books and all that, So it was a bit difficult for them. So the fact that they actually came out in front of my lawyer and admitted that the Tavistock Institute was behind it, I immediately stopped the guy. I remember the doctor, this head doctor, and I said, "Are you serious?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Okay, lawyer, take note, because I'm going to put this in my next book." I was really happy about it. I was, wow, these people are like really over the top. They're doing it in front of us. Tavistock Institute is the biggest institute of social engineering. If you go out of that social engineering prison, you get taken.
Were you ever exposed to or under the influence of mind control growing up in the family that you come from?
Oh, no, I mean, I would say that my father was an expert in mind control and teach me many tricks and many techniques. I mean, it was his own game, because being such a, I mean, he had been in the Navy as a doctor, then he went into the study of psychiatry. very deep. He reached the maximum level. So at one point, though, there was something that scared him. It was towards the middle of the 70s that one of his clients, when he was on holiday, killed himself. Then he withdrawn a little bit from it because he thought they're having a lot of dependency, the patients from me, too much dependency, and I don't really know if I still believe in psychiatry. That's really what the final thing was. He didn't believe in psychiatry anymore because he saw that it was being used, that on top of all the institutions of mental health, there was a plan, and he didn't like that plan. He didn't like the fact that people could be persecuted for political reasons, and the system was there to help this.
So he never put you through any kind of, say, trauma-based MK-Ultra mind control as a child?
I would say that it was kind of trauma-based, the fact that I was brought in the middle of the jungle in Sri Lanka when I was 6 years old, and there were a bunch of people drumming with that kind of trauma-based. Okay, or being on an elephant in the middle of the jungle when you're 6 years old in a remote country, living for months in the jungle. Well, that is the kind of experience going into temples or Buddhist temples when I was a little child on the other side of the world, living for a long time, and then coming back to Europe. And I tell you, me coming back into Europe after that kind of experience and starting school in a little Italian town where I had to pretend that I wasn't the grandson of my grandfather, I couldn't nominate my grandfather, I had to cover up my real identity. It was not an easy upbringing because it was kind of stressing to be always hiding and not really revealing who you were, because the fact was that there was a lot of political persecution after my grandfather died. My father got busted. I mean, they even raided our house. They wanted to accuse my father of being one of the heads of the Red Brigades, which didn't have anything to do with them. So, I mean, they really wanted to set him up there, because when he received this call and he said, listen, man, they're going to raid your place. I still remember, it was yesterday, my father said, we need to bring everything, all the stuff, dig it. Boom, we start digging in the garden. I mean, for a kid, this makes you understand that the situation is not really, normal situation.
But you never went under the mind control programming, and you were never sexually assaulted as a child yourself?
The only abuse that I had was within the Catholic Church.
You had abuse in the Catholic Church?
Only once it happened that this priest put his hands, fortunately, in the back of my pants, not in the front, because that would have been probably like George Pell and his own victims. But it happened. I talked about it actually recently with Michael Boris of Church Militant. But it gave me strength.
How old were you at that time when that happened?
Well, but it made me understand the falsity of this church, because I was already working at that point. I was actually already, I was 13, I think 12, 13, and I was already working. I was doing radio shows, and I was doing as a technician. Then I started my own radio show on a Sunday. I was a very young child.
A teenager though, huh?
Well, 12 years old, you're still a child. I mean, you're not really a teenager yet.
But it didn't happen when you were 3 or 4 years old, as what we're hearing is happening on a massive scale.
It couldn't happen because, you see, I was respected. When it happened, I still remember, the priest, he did that thing. I turned around and I watched him like, what the fuck are you doing, basically? And he took it off. And then he was scared because he knew who I was and my family. This didn't happen with the poor children. I saw poor children in front of me that didn't have the same luck. And unfortunately, we all knew that maybe that child or the other child was abused.
Did you ever witness any children being abused by any of the priests or anybody within these circles?
I witnessed the abuse in the sense that everybody around them knew that they were abused, and then actually these children were groomed and brought up to work within the Vatican because they had been abused.
So you were never present at any ceremonies where these things were actually taking place so that you could see it?
I personally wanted to always avoid that. I remember there was a specific occasion, like the priest will pray very much on children that went on these summer camps. Okay, now I always avoided that because I knew exactly what was going on, and all my friends described me what was going on. So it wasn't like, you heard it from somebody who heard it from somebody. No, I knew exactly the people who were involved, and unfortunately, that gave me immediately a disgust towards the Catholic Church, because you see, there was a period of time between I was 10 and 12, I was even thinking of becoming a priest. I was even thinking of joining seminary. I had been to visit a seminary. But when that happened, that specific thing, I was disgusted to a level that I said, because it happened to me, because the guy put his hands down my pants. It wasn't a nice thing. And of course, I was strong. I reacted in that way. Other children didn't.
So could we say that you were lucky or fortunate that you never had to go through any of those things that you knew other people, other children were going through in the same circles that you were part of?
Yeah, because you see, the thing is that we were living outside of Rome in environments of very simple people, peasants, like we would say. Aristocrats have this saying, when people are from comics, they call them peasants. But it's not I'm not saying as a diminished, because they were nice people. I grew up. As I told you earlier on, I was brought up in places where I was not even supposed to really say who I was completely, But the priest knew exactly who my father was, my grandfather was, and all that, because priests have a recording of every single, who's the families and everything.
But are the local priests also involved in these things, or are they just on a high Vatican level?
No. Local priest, Vatican level, the whole show. And the fact that I was, of course, my mother was working, doing a radio show for the Catholic radio, and later she even participated to Vatican TV show on Teleradio Sole at that time.
So because of your background, because of your family, maybe that was why you were not exposed to it yourself, or you weren't directly involved. Is that correct?
Yeah, because I drew the line when I said no, and I could say no.
And you could do that at 12, of course.
Of course, but another child couldn't do that at 12, even at 15, or even at 16 or 17, I think, because these priests have very much power over those poor children, even if they're grown up to actually defend themselves. But they have control of you, because they have the fact that, especially for the poor, I'm not saying for me, but for a poor child, it was completely different. The fact that I was grown up out of Rome, in this environment, that there was also people from common families, poor children. Sorry for saying peasant before, but that was, of course, I wasn't brought up in my own environment. I guess if I was brought up in my own environment, it might be that I will never even see that kind of thing, because I'm sure that if you are a rich kid going in the traditional rich school, and they know that all the children of that class are all influential, the sons of influential people, the child predator will not risk his life or by doing that kind of thing. They have like a manual. A few years back, 5 years ago, we got hold of a manual written by a priest on how to prey on children, and it was written this.
Really?
Yeah. This was a big scandal. Also, it went on the newspapers in Italy. But this manual, I read it. It said exactly those kind of things. You have to prey on certain kind of children that don't have a family.
We have to go back to what we were talking about before in order for people to really understand why this is going on, why this is happening, why we're hearing about it. It's coming out more and more in the mainstream media as well. But of course, somebody who's been part of it and been investigating it, and like you for a long time and exposing it, please talk about what is it? Why are they doing that? Why are they performing the satanic rituals and the pedophilia? What type of energy that you were talking about do they want to get from this? Why is this?
We are here in front of a church which has embraced the devil, has embraced Satan, has embraced these demonic forces that they thrive on these energies. They live out of these energies. They live out of the energy of a young child. that gets raped, unfortunately. They live out of the blood of a child that is sacrificed. They live out of evil, because they are fed with this evil energy. They can't have this power if they're not fed.
How can that energy manifest? We are talking about a frequency of absolute fear from these poor children, right?
They practice Satanism. That's the thing that I started to really view more and more when I was even a young child. There was something dark about this Catholic Church. There was something sinister going on. And later on, I started to see that there was something really sinister when in Rome at age 20, I saw that there were satanic sects doing these things. And then I realized that there was a connection with the Catholic priests. Because the Catholic priests are the only ones who are said to be able to practice the Black Mass in the most traditional way.
Were you present at any rituals where they were practicing satanic sex?
Yes. I've been present to this kind of rituals.
What took place there?
Well, at that time I got initiated into the OTO. I was young. I did a lot of activities around this Ordo Templi Orientis of Aleister Crowley. And then there was other groups, also other sects that were even more secretive, like Amucos or many others now that, you have a whole range of small sects that have sprung out of Telema or out of Voodoo, like the OTOA. But in reality, I was young and I wanted to have fun and I wanted to be transgressive myself. So I didn't really play the part of the victim there because I was indulging. I was part of the problem. I was indulging even when I was in Scandinavia. It was actually in Scandinavia, in Norway, in Oslo, at one point I realized that this thing was evil. Like I told you earlier on, I discovered it when I was initiated into the highest degrees of these systems, because then they reveal you the importance of the human sacrifice, the fetus sacrifice, this other sacrifice, and they explain you technically how to recite those rituals and how to bring this power upon you so you can then unleash it upon the world and so on. So, it was interesting. It was scary.
Did you witness it?
Yeah, that's why I had to get exercise after.
If they're doing this to suck the energy by doing these satanic rituals, is that because they want to summon the devil? And how do they, or how are they able to manifest the devil through these rituals? Is that something that will manifest physically, or is it a vibration, or what is it?
You see, there's various kinds of demonic forces at work and various kinds of witchcraft and sorcery that you can participate to. I participated to a more heterosexual approach of witches in which I could come in, and I never participated into situations in which there were young children or child sacrifice. I participated in situations where maybe there was animal sacrifice, but that's it.
Did you do that?
No, I didn't personally do it.
But you witnessed it?
Sure.
What kind of animals were sacrificed during those rituals?
Chicken, it can be the black cat we talked before. Mostly it's chickens, mostly it's the black cats, what I personally witnessed. And a cow, that's a big animal. That was pretty shocking, but that was also done.
How did that affect you?
It was negative. I think that when you're playing with these forces, they definitely leave you something on which is dirty. And so then in the times after that, I had to purify myself because, of course, I felt this energy and I didn't like it.
So are you having sex at the same time that this killing is taking place at these rituals?
Not usually. You see, you have it depends, because you have the Black Mass. You have Crowley's Mass, which I incented on the Figaro. And when you have that, you don't really have the sacrifice. The sacrifice takes place before or after.
So it is connected to the sexual activity, but it takes place before or after that ceremony.
Yes, of course. Like, for example, you will have a bunch of witches indulging after they sacrificed a black cat, and they will indulge because they wanted to nurture this energy that they have evoked through this sacrifice. You see?
Can they evoke the devil?
I tell you another thing that really was a little bit disturbing. When I saw that these people were also playing with human bones, and that they were keeping human bones under the beds. Once there was a witch that freaked me out with that, because I mean, they were also using human bones.
For what?
Well, I mean, you use them even in Catholic religion. You have human bones of saints and so on. I guess that they use them for getting power to their egregor, which is this fourth form that comes together with each occult group. And of course, then they have they give themselves to a specific demon or an entity in these groups. There was in Oslo, for example, Melektau. They were like really devoted to this force demon, a very powerful one, I must say, indeed. Because when I got involved with these people, I got bitten by a poison spider right here, and I had a terrible accident in my head 2 weeks after. I mean, I was like, whoa, man, this is like bad luck impersonified. I mean, they were really playing with some dark stuff. And if you got involved with it and you didn't protect yourself, you will risk a lot. Even if you were a skilled magician, a skilled esoteric person with knowledge about these things. You have to be very careful.
They're worshiping the devil, but is that something that can manifest physically? What is the devil? What is the devil actually? Satan
and his legion, the devil as you call it, he has a legion of demons that operate in a hierarchy which is lined up in the various grimoires and magical books in a very methodical way. It's not just chaotic.
But they're not physical, or are they physical? Can they be physical?
They can be physical the moment in which you open yourself to demonic possession, you get possessed by them. At the same time, if they want to manifest in front of you in a different shape, like in the shape of an animal or even a human shape, even if it's not really human or kind of, you can spot it that it's not really human 100%. But in any case, you are, when you see that kind of thing, I tell you, you will not be, I mean, you are just like...
So it's somebody else that you see as being, well, possessed by this demon. It's not a demon manifesting with like a shape, like an alien form, for example.
That happens if you are in front of an extra-dimensional portal. I made a whole chapter about it in my book Invisible Master, talked about it extensively. But only in certain specific or holy places that are regarded as extra-dimensional gates for these entities, then, you know, you do the ritual and then they come. Because they come from even other parts of the universe using these doorways.
Parallel universes.
Parallel universes, and also this universe with having the possibility of transporting themselves through these tunnels, you know. Space and time has a different value for these entities that, of course, are extra-dimensional.
So we're talking about extraterrestrials or interdimensional beings. Are they physical like aliens, or is it more like what we've heard about in the Gnostic writings, Archons, or what the Muslims call the jinn, demiurge, demons, angels?
You have both. You have both.
Both?
One or the other, you have both.
So is the devil an alien... an extraterrestrial and not what Christians call the devil?
Sure, I even written about it in, I think, volume 3 of my Confessions. But also now I have this new book which is called this one here, in which I show for the first time a specific pic of a member of the Illuminati, the vice president of the Academy of the Illuminati in Rome, Pier Giorgio Bassi, who is himself the spokesperson for this international institute which is based in Moscow, dealing with these entities. And I would like to show you this pic because he is next to the Cardinal Parolin, the Secretary of State of the Vatican. And this is a very rare pic because it shows you how intimate they are. And it shows you also that this is not just a conspiracy.
And this is a whistleblower that you interviewed, or somebody you know, and then you blew the whistle on him.
Yeah, I know, and I blew the whistle on him. Here, this is the Secretary.
Oh, there's a picture of him.
Yeah, this is the Secretary of State of the Vatican.
Yeah. Is that in St. Peter's Church?
Yeah, and this is him.
Uh-huh.
When I bring evidence, I bring evidence. I don't just bring some tabloid evidence.
He's not too thrilled that you've been writing about him, is he, or what?
Of course, especially because I have exposed the fact that him and John Podesta, which, as you know, is the chairman of the campaign of Hillary Clinton, met in the summer of 2000. In fact, I made here a chapter about the fact they met in the summer of 2016 to talk about the aliens that are basically giving instructions from the headquarters in Moscow.
In Moscow?
In Moscow, yeah. And for the first time in this book, I actually give all the names of the people involved in the Jesuits, in the intelligence of the ex-Soviet Union, the names of the various agents. It's called, in the late 80s, a group of researchers was called in Moscow Expert Management Unit of General Staff. Now, the KGB conducted a very big study, and at one point got in privileged contact with these entities, and they founded an organization called the International Organization for the Destinies of the World, which is driven by a group based in Moscow. This organization is based in Washington, London, Beijing, Tel Aviv, and Rome. And this organization in Moscow is called the Center for Information Analysis and Strategies of Situations, and it operates directly under the control of Vladimir Putin. And this is said to be a very powerful organization, which is driven by this guy called Alexei Savin. Alexei Savin, I have a photo of him. He's an ex-lieutenant colonel in Russia.
And you interviewed him for your latest book?
No, I managed to get this information from a journalist called Giacomo Amadori, who himself then got the information from Savin and from Podesta and Amadori. Because I haven't spoken with Amadori in the last 3 years, because of course we have departed, went different ways. When I was back in Italy, he invited me to his office of the Academy of the Illuminati in Rome to strike some kind of alliance. We collaborated, imagine this, to the launch of the film Angel and Demons.
You were a consultant on that film, or what?
I was actually interviewed, and I was promoting it when it was published here in Italy.
And you were actually out already in the public arena talking about this when the movie was done, right?
They asked me to, at the time when they actually shot the movie, I was just coming back to Rome, so they couldn't get me as a consultant right then, because it was actually the summer of 2008, which I had been arrested in Norway for espionage, and all that happened when I went there. So it was a little bit of but when I went back, they called me to their office and they said, do you want to participate to the launch of the film, actually, here in Italy? We will be interviewing you, putting on your magazines, then you can go on TV, this and that. And I accepted, because I had just come back in Italy. It was the summer of 2008, after having a terrible experience in Norway, being accused of espionage, escaping, having a very bad time. I mean, it seemed like the right thing to do. And it gave me some publicity, right? Also because in Italy, I had never really wrote in Italian or talked in Italian on the internet. So when I came back in Italy, I wasn't really a public person in Italy as I am now, because only the people talk English, and it's a minority in Italy, as you know, watch my videos on the internet stuff. Okay, they knew who I was, maybe some people who are curious, but instead, the year after, in May, I remember 2009, when they launched Angel and Demons, I ended up on the big magazine, I think it was Panorama, and then with Berlusconi on the cover, me a big thing. I think I still have it here, maybe I can watch. This was Panorama. It's an important newspaper in Italy.
Berlusconi.
Of course, it's owned by Berlusconi. And I was invited, and actually the guy who did the photo shoot, Gerald Bruno, ended up doing then the photo shoots for all my book covers for my books after in the later on. But I mean, this article, which I'm going to show you, made me suddenly very popular also here in Italy, which of course was an opportunity for me. Watch, they made a big thing here, Illuminati.
And that's you under the robe there.
Watch, and here I am.
Aha, yes.
And then together with me there was Massimo Introvigne, there was the Grand Master of Italian, there was this guy who used to be the Grand Master of Italian Freemason, is now the Grand Master of the Illuminati, Giuliano Di Bernardo, Massimo Introvigne. I mean, I was in good company, and suddenly I ended up staying in Italy, and then my father died the following year. Fortunately, after he managed to witness the fact that they had given up on my accusation. The PST, the Norwegian Secret Police, had given up on my accusation of espionage in February 2010. But unfortunately, later on, in the 10th of March 2010, he died. So at that point, I decided to really stay in Italy with the woman that then became my second wife, who is my current wife, and also the publisher of my book company, Cursum Perficio.
And you were married to a lady before that in Norway?
Yes, before who was part of this Gulen movement, Gulen sect, Muslim, Turkish, and that was a big problem because since then I never saw my child ever again.
So you have a child with your ex-wife, and you haven't seen your child?
After the accusation of espionage, I had to leave Norway. They told me to forget about my child because these people were too powerful. You have to understand that these people, see, in Norway, they were all involved with the brother of my ex-wife was involved with the ex-prime minister of Norway, had opened a center for peace and dialogue. It was all rubbish, but it was all run by the Clinton Foundation and connected with the Clinton Foundation and the Clintons, basically because they were in charge of things really in the socialist countries, and they still are to some extent. You remember that countries like Norway even given money to the Clinton Foundation.
Yeah, but what was the accusation? Why didn't they allow you to see your child? I mean, what did that have to do with you being framed for espionage if you didn't do it? Because
I went there to actually assist to the court hearing for seeing my child, and they arrested me when I went out of the lift. I was actually about to go to the court. I had a journalist with me called Hans Garde from Norway, fortunately, and my mother. And I was in the same building as they did the Breivik case. And when I went in that building in Oslo, the lift went up, open, and they said, PST, you're under arrest, you're under arrest. They brought me into a separate room, and then they brought me back into the room to have my court case regarding my son. But at that point, I just... But
why did your ex-wife go against you and didn't want you to see your child?
No, at that point I had to, they framed me, she was also in it, to frame me and accuse me of espionage, so I never saw, because they wanted me to bring, when I was against the Jesuits, and they were all siding with Thomas Michel, the head of the Jesuit Interreligious Dialogue at that time, Secretary of the Interreligious Dialogue. They were he came to Oslo. I met Thomas Michel in Oslo. I didn't meet him in Rome, and he was siding with these Muslims. The one world religion that is coming together now in Abu Dhabi with the Pope Francis started a long time ago. That's why I knew all these things, and at that point I got really angry and I started to say these things to the world. People didn't believe me. People think I was making up things, conspiracies, all this rubbish. So that was a big problem for me, because you see, I had come from the world of music and so on, but I also had been for many years a journalist, because I started when I was young with the radios and stuff, and I started to train also as a journalist, and I went on being, on the side when I was in the music business. Every now and then I will involve myself in journalism. But of course, getting involved full-time in journalism and exposing these truths made me very unpopular, especially with my first wife that was with this movement connected to the Jesuits. The Fethullah Gulen movement is the movement that tried the coup in Turkey only a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, no? That coup that was in Turkey. And that was when my son was finally brought back to Norway, because he was brought at that time in Istanbul until 3 years ago when there was a coup, 2 or 3 years, I don't remember.
So your ex-wife was a Muslim lady, and she brought your son to Istanbul. Is that how I understand it? Do I understand it correctly?
Yeah, because they were, because she was also Norwegian, but she was also this part of this organization that's very influential in Scandinavia also, of Muslims called the Fethullah, that is under this guru called Fethullah Gulen, who is a big crook who worked for the CIA, and worked with the Democrat side of the CIA.
What is the difference between, now we're talking about politics, and you're exposing the New World Order, talking about how everything within a political structure is connected. The Democrats, the Republicans, and all of the different parties in between. It's all part of the same thing, right? New World Order.
It's not the same thing, because I come from inside the New World Order and I know the struggle within the New World Order, and it's not the same thing.
In what way is it not the same thing?
This left-wing socialist ideology has been made more and more part of the New World Order in the last, let's say, from the fall of the Soviet Union, the moment in which they put down the defenses against communism. That's when, the whole thing started. All the 1968 programmed MK Ultra people brainwashed right and center. They took control of the universities in 1968. We know that there was a left-wing uprising all over the world. That's how they took control of the universities. But the left-wing is inherently evil.
So how about the right wing? That's the same thing. All the conservatives. We've had many Republican presidents during the years.
The neocons are absolutely evil. In fact, Cardinal Pell, for example, was very closely associated with the neocons. I personally, myself, I am more of a libertarian and I'm a sovereignist. And so I am for the sovereignty of the states, because I know the plan is a New World Order, and so the only solution is to close down the whole thing and give up the New World Order in favor of the sovereignty of the single states, something that they don't want you to do because they want to divide the world in continents, this sector.
But they also want to divide the public and public opinion, saying, oh, you have to vote for the Democrats, you have to be a conservative or Republican, but it's the same thing really, isn't it?
No, it's not the same thing for me. I was born out of a family that 100 years ago, part of my family had to escape Russia because persecuted by communists. My grandfather, Sicilian, was nearly beaten up and killed by the communists. My father was persecuted because I was arrested on order of the left-wing Matteo Renzi. This is a political persecution by the communists.
But the communists are also orchestrated by the New World Order, right?
Communism is Satanism. It was born within the Illuminati. They brought out, that's an evil side of the Illuminati social experiment that I never agreed is communism. Communism is Satanism.
How about Nazism, which of course we know all about after what happened in Germany?
Nationalism is National Socialism. We are always going back to socialism. Everything that is socialism. Mussolini was a socialist before he became a fascist. Hitler was a socialist before he founded the... So these people were socialists. Socialism is inherently evil.
But in Denmark and in Sweden and Norway, and you've been there, these are socialist countries, but they're certainly not communist. In America, people often think that the communists and the socialists are the same.
No, of course they are different, but in the end, both communism and socialism are all the same thing.
But communism is a dictatorship, like Nazism.
If you actually go and speak with them, they are communists. Okay? So the Ocasio-Cortez of the situation, she's a brainwashed individual preaching communism. This is, at the moment, that you have to understand here, we will not be able to fight Satan and the Legion of Satan without really re-embracing our Christian values here in Europe. Not the way Ratzinger did it, because he then he was an hypocrite himself. And then Pope Francis, of course, is now destroying Catholicism because he wants everybody to become a communist like he is. Because that's what he is. He's production of the liberation theology that infiltrated the Catholic Church. There was 9,000 KGB agents that infiltrated including McCarrick. McCarrick, the pervert who was defrocked, he was a KGB agent. There was a guy called Robert Graham who was a Jesuit, who I used to know in the 90s when he was still alive, who taught me a lot. And he was fighting and hunting down the KGB agents within the Catholic Church. But it was already too late. They had infiltrated the whole apparatus, and they were gays, perverts, and progressive. I'm sorry to say that if we want to defeat this demonology surrounding the Catholic Church, well, my solution, I said the other day at the Vatican, if I have to be really honest about it, a new Inquisition led by the Knights Templars.
Really? Do you think that?
I think that I could lead one of this Inquisition because I'm a Knights Templar myself.
But why are you putting gay people in the same sentence with perverts and other people?
I have many gay friends, and gays are perfectly right for me. In the Vatican, being gay is not natural. They can be gay anywhere else, but if you are a Catholic priest, you are going against your religion. And the moment in which you're doing that, you are supporting the pedophiles, because the pedophiles are going to blackmail you. The pedophiles are blackmailing the gay majority of the Vatican.
If you are a Catholic, you're not allowed to have sex, whether you are a nun or a monk or a priest or anything else. And you're not allowed to have sex at all.
Religion, the problem here is this. There is a clergy which is blackmailed by a pedophile minority. They are blackmailed because they are gay. The problem is that they could be gay without being priests. That would be fine, because I have absolutely nothing to do against the gay, because I was brought up, my godfather was himself a famous Eric Egborn, a famous artist of forgeries, who was himself homosexual, and he was my godfather, baptized. I was brought up, Kate Hearing, I have a dedication poster here in front of me. I have William Burroughs, I met when I was a little child with Brandt. Talking to me about being against homosexuals, it would be completely ridiculous. In fact, I say that in my latest book, where though I assert one thing, to make a child dance in a strip joint and say that that's fine, no, it's not.
Why do you think there are so many priests and monks maybe, or others within the cardinals and within the Vatican structure that are either perverts, if they are pedophiles, and doing these sacrifices, and also homosexuals?
I explained in my recent book, Confessions of an Illuminati, volume 666, this book here, there is a whole chapter about the fact that what really clashes with the celibacy of the church, and also the fact that demonstrates how, after the implementation of celibacy, because until 5 centuries ago, it was always a little bit bland, this implementation. You couldn't really know if the guy who was living 100 kilometers away had 2 wives, 4 mistresses, or whatever, and he was a priest. You just have to believe in what they say, okay? There wasn't social networks, there wasn't immediate images that could, expose people. When 5 centuries ago, though, they started to implement the Council of Trent a more strict approach, strangely enough, that's when the black masses are born. That's when Catholic priests get involved with the Affaire de Poisson in France.
And what, again, taking us back to what is happening at those rituals, what are they getting out of practicing these black masses?
The thing is this, I think that part of them just indulges in their own perversions, because it gives them a way to indulge in their own perversions.
So that's it. So that is really the bottom line, is it?
Part of it, of course, is doing it because it's part of, feeling these demonic energies and Satan.
But can you feel them? That is what we really want to know. Can you feel those demonic entities? Do they take form? You said that they don't take form, but they sense them or they feel them. What is happening at those rituals?
No. I said, like the genies and the thing, they can't take form. They take form. They can even materialize in a black cat that passes in front of you.
But that's only in something that exists already. It's not like a holographic in structure, or that they manifest from another, like through a vortex or something.
Once I saw, for example, a manifestation, it was pretty gross. It looked like it would be like an horror, like some kind of horror movie, lady, old, like with the breath smell, appears out of nowhere and disappears out of nowhere.
So she appeared, like she took form in the room where she wasn't really present.
Especially in the cases that I have analyzed, there's always this dark figure that appears also. And that it's like a shadow that manifests in front of the possessed group of people. Because, let's say this, Satanism Satanism it can manifest in a group of people that get then possessed. I don't know if you ever had a group possession. Group possession has been very big, even at the time of the Inquisition. They had to go into monasteries where whole groups of priests or nuns were possessed at the same time, and it became like a sickness. So what is this sickness? Where it comes from? Of course, they had been practicing dark things, they had practicing satanic rituals, and they fell for these demonic forces in the end. I describe in my recent book how Paris has become the headquarters of the global satanic takeover, because it was 5 centuries ago that Caterina de' Medici, who was queen there, celebrated the first Black Mass. And the first Black Mass was celebrated because she wanted to help her power, she wanted to help the health of her son. In order to do that, she got a Catholic priest to celebrate this ritual and at the same time chop off the head of a little child. Now, this little child, when the head will be chopped off, literally the oracle will talk through the child.
And this could actually happen, you say?
Well, of course, then Black Masses became much. I mean, Catherine de' Medici lived between 1519 and 1589. She was Queen of France during the 16th century, but later on we have other figures that become just a few decades later. There was a big scandal in France where this Catholic monk and a bunch of Catholic priests were caught celebrating human sacrifice to the extent that one woman, they went into her garden and they found 2,500 remains of bodies, 2,500, and they had been sacrificing non-stop Black Mass after Black Mass. So, I mean, here we're not talking about a little sacrifice, 1, 2, 3. No, 2,500, and this is certified and historically.
But the reason for it is because of, I mean, we can talk for a long time about how horrific and terrible it is, but the reason for it.
Talisman that gives them power, maybe bearing a variety of names of demons, invoked by the monk or the priest in charge of the ritual.
So they absorb a kind of energy, is that it?
Yes. Abbe Guiborg, whose activities I have explained in my latest book, is one of these figures, and one of the historically probably the most important one in the context of Satanism, because he celebrated the Black Mass in Paris of 1666, which is, an important year for the Satanists, just as 1966, because in December of 1965, the Second Vatican Council finishes the operation of destroying the values, traditional values of the Catholic Church in December of 1965. Then in January 1966 is the year zero of Satanism. That's it. And then from that year onwards, they have to promote the Satanism. So they pick up Roman Polanski, they do the movie Rosemary's Baby. And the strange thing is that while the Catholic Church is pushed to abandon the Latin forms of rituals, the Satanists gradually absorb them and start adopting only Latin in their Black Masses.
So what are those demons, those dark entities that they actually feed on, and then what are they? Are they the Archons?
Well, one of the most important ones, Asmodeus, for example. I don't know if you heard of Asmodeus. Asmodeus is one of the most important demons in these Black Masses. Then you have Beelzebub, you have Astaroth, you have many others. But when it comes to the specific masses, they especially are working with Asmodeus.
But what kind of entities are they? I mean, some kind of interdimensional extraterrestrial force, or what are they?
The genes are extra-dimensional, and they are extraterrestrial, because, I mean, they come from another dimension. I was once exorcised by a Muslim exorcist in the city of Konya in Turkey, out of taking away from me 54 genes that had been cursed upon by a black magician and given this gene. And so this guy made this operation, and he exorcised me. I described also in this new book an exorcism that I was subject to in Egypt, in Cairo, by Madame Fula, which was done in a specific way with boiling lead on top of the head captures the demon when the water is poured on. It's a practice which is called, I can tell you, I want to show you actually the picture of when, apart from the fact I want to show you a picture, for example, of the Black Mass, so you have an idea.
And that's a naked woman lying. That's the very stereotypical what you see in films also, huh?
Watch this. This is a little boy and the woman. Okay, so there is a child there. Okay, and this is a Catholic priest also celebrating the Mass. Of course, the naked woman, but like I said, there is the element of the child, because a male child without perfection is chosen, given his first communion in these masses, and then brutally killed.
But why male children, infants?
I guess that that is because the males are born under the influence of the sun, not of the moon, and they needed that kind of form of energy for their own rituals, especially if you want to call a specific demon that maybe feeds upon that. If you are calling them, if you are feeding another form, maybe you need a female, but in that case it's different. I guess the female sacrifice of a virgin is also, you have to make sure that she's a virgin. Will you find a virgin? Not easy.
Because the energy is pure?
Yeah.
But will you agree that these entities, these demons are like Archons or some kind of extraterrestrial?
I wrote about it extensively in my book Invisible Master.
But for people who have not read your books yet, and we can talk in a moment about how they can get them, but if you can just mention some of those things for people to really know, a little bit more about what your philosophy is on that, and also life, alien life in the universe.
I think that I have experienced myself contact, you see, once during it was 1993, April 1993. I was myself involved in the magic of Abramelin the Mage, so that was a magical operation that I was part of, and I ended up during the course of this operation manifesting this white light surrounded by these blue borders in front of me, moving in the room. It petrified. It was scary. Most of all, it was a very scary experience. Of course, it demonstrated in front of my eyes that these things exist.
A white light?
A white light surrounded by a very thin blue border.
Was it a figure? Like an entity?
An entity, yeah.
What do you think it was?
Well, I was trying to achieve what you want to achieve with the magic of the Mage, which is the knowledge and conversation with your holy guardian angel. I don't know if I managed to actually achieve that in some way at that time, but it sure looked that it was something a bit angelic more than demonic, at least to my eyes. It didn't have the negativity feel of a demonic force that I had at times.
But a lot of people who are researching these things say that demons can take the shape or the form of an angel to make people think or believe that they're seeing an angel, something angelic.
Well, I'm sure that it could be, like you said, it could be an illusion, that is drawn by these figures. But I wasn't really there expecting necessarily a religious figure to appear in front of me. I was doing the magic of a man in the Mage, and during my experience, I actually encountered an alien force, which at that point identified as part of a squadron of UFOs, basically, of a squadron of aliens that was on top of Rome. I was doing this ritual. You were talking about the Archons. I think the Archons and the jinns are really the same thing, really.
That's what they say.
I think that there is, of course, this view of good versus evil also in the Gnostics, and the problem posed by the Archons in terms of evil is the fact that they are the source of control in this dimension. And the fact that we are enslaved by them is also because we don't really want to take the risk to go out of our comfort zone the majority of times. Let's be honest about it. Because I noticed that a lot of people, when they start seeing things, that I have described today to you in a way that is a bit fun. We discussed it in a sociable, amicable way. But when people actually live these experiences, at times they live them, like even myself, of course, with great pain. But after they don't really understand what they're living, and at that time they also say, okay, maybe I don't want to have anything to do with it anymore. And they close the door in a way, because it's easier to just say, okay, I don't want to believe in that. I prefer to have my life full of certainties.
And it's also very difficult for a lot of people to actually process that something can exist and be real if you can't see it.
In fact, in my book Invisible Master, I explained how Fethullah Gulen, for example, that famous Islamic leader which I mentioned earlier on, he actually wrote extensively about this subject. And once I witnessed in one of his talks, he talked about the fact that the jinn controlled the CIA and that he was witness to that. So these entities controlled actually the CIA, because of course, if you are an intelligence agency or you are an institution and want to have more power and you give yourself to these forces, I'm sure that they can give you a lot if you let them guide you. But the problem is that then you are interrupted, you are serving evil, you are no longer on the good side of things. I think that in my work, after all these years, I have learned how to distinguish good and evil and feel the heart of people in front of me. Possession is not something that is a joke. Possession is a very scary thing. I have not only been the subject myself of some exorcisms to purify myself from being in all this.
Why are people being, let's say, possessed by demons more regularly in Southern Europe, more namely in Italy, more so than anywhere else, usually? I mean, we don't hear much about that in other countries.
Okay, in my new book here, I make a study, a research. There is abductions are getting less and less, and possessions are rising. But the phenomenon is the same in the end.
So what are your thoughts on the reptilian theory?
On the reptilian theory, like I explained extensively also in my book Invisible Master, is something that you have to understand by the concept of genes, for example, are often depicted as reptilian. The entities are often, the fact that we have also an element of reptile in us because, we have a
reptilian brain.
Reptilian element. In our brain, but of course that's because of our roots. But I would say that apart from that, so that makes us all a little bit reptilian. I don't believe there is if I had to believe exactly in what David Icke initially said, that the reptilians of the royal family will have their skin transformed. I mean, I'm a relative of the royal family of England and of the Queen Mother. I never saw that kind of thing. But I can't say that maybe you can spot that reptilian element in the eyes at times when they are possessed.
Have you seen that?
Yes. Yes.
When you were close to all of these things and you were part in these rituals and were a member of these lodges and secret societies, you never heard about the reptilian, the shape-shifting, the Archons, jinns, or those things taking part in those things, in the rituals?
Archons are discussed regularly because they're part of the Gnostic tradition. The Gnostic tradition is part of the tradition of the Illuminati in the various emanations, okay? Crowley had his own Gnostic Catholic church he founded. Then you have a whole bunch of Gnostics that, of course, are more towards the traditional Christian values with their own forms of Gnosticism, like Valentinian Gnostics, which I respect very much, and other forms of Gnosticism, which I think they are good. I mean, Pope Francis instead last year condemned them in his encyclica, which is unheard of, because I mean he could have at least mentioned the Satanists as a problem for a society, but instead he mentions the Gnostics. I mean, of course, this Pope at times it's pretty incredible where he goes.
You have said that Pope Francis is actually not a real pope that was elected in the real traditional way, but you call him the Black Pope. So my question for you now is, what is the difference or the similarities between the now sitting Pope, Pope Francis, and Pope Benedict Joseph Ratzinger? who resigned, which is one of the first popes who ever resigned for several hundred years.
Okay, Black Pope is a term that has been going on for hundreds of years and was usually given to the head of the Jesuits. Okay, now the moment in which the actual head of the Jesuits, it's now a figure that also is a bit like the Pope. We had the three different generals of the Jesuits in the last 10 years. We had Hans Kowenbach, then Adolf Nicolas, and now Sosa from Venezuela. This is unheard of before in history. This kind of title always stayed the same. But then when it comes down to the Pope, the fact that a Jesuit for the first time in history became a Pope, of course, everybody identifies him as the Black Pope. Okay? I think that we still have time to see the ultimate Black Pope, which actually is going to be from Africa, and that's coming soon after Pope Francis.
So you're talking about skin color now. You're not talking about dark rituals and.
In this case, I'm talking about the Black Pope. But when it comes down to the ritual, the Black Pope of the Jesuits has always been in charge of the intelligence for the Vatican. They have been the military arm since the Vatican, for 5 centuries. Infiltrating governments, religions, movements. They took the place of the Knights Templars. When Ignazio Loyola founded, he was a member of the Alumbrados, of the Illuminati of his time. An occultist, somebody who actually was condemned 5 times by the Inquisition. 5 times. I mean, this guy used to get the ladies to do some fellatio, maybe by hypnotizing, all kinds of things. I mean, Ignazio Loyola was a pretty far out kind of individual and a pretty dangerous one, but he devised this spiritual exercise that became like this mantra for the military arm of the church, and for reacquiring that power that, of course, was getting lost the moment in which, they started to the whole thing of Martin Luther appeared. The church went on the defensive and then went on the counterattack. Now, they infiltrated everything. They infiltrated Protestantism to the extent that nowadays, after 5 centuries, if you go anywhere in Europe, inside a Protestant church of any denomination, the Jesuits are controlling it. And it's now becoming very visible, very easy to actually check it out, because, they have managed to put together this plan, and now they have united Christianity. Their next step is to embrace Islam, then embrace everybody else, and then one world religion under the artificial intelligence. That's the plan of the Vatican.
So are the Jesuits more powerful than the Pope?
This Pope is not really a Pope, because he's simply a Jesuit. He might be the real leader of the Jesuits, because I saw that he's always there in Borgo Santo Spirito regularly with the general of the Jesuits. And he's a Jesuit. So, this is unheard of. They actually have a special kind of vow. The Jesuits, their ultimate thing is to actually obey to the Pope. Whatever the Pope says. It's not to obey to Jesus. The other orders of the Catholic Church, they all have to obey to Jesus and the Lord and God and the whole show. No, the Jesuits have to obey only to the Pope. If the Pope tells, go and murder that, they have to murder that. If they want to do that, they do it.
And that did not happen when Pope Benedict was in office?
But he wasn't a Jesuit.
Who was he? And why did he abdicate?
Because the church went in a serious crisis with this pedophilia, with becoming a big problem. The increasing problems also in the Vatican finances, because there is a lot of problems also in the way the Vatican invested their own money. They've been doing some really screwed up investments and so on. So in the end, Ratzinger was forced by his own also limits as a man, because he is very much drawn to the other sex, to the male sex. He's homosexual, but he's also drawn to pedophilia. He likes younger adults, and so at the end he was easy to blackmail out.
So he was blackmailed out of office. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, we have in my book Pope Francis, the Last Pope ? I show how Cardinal Maria Martini, who was the mentor of Pope Francis, a member of the St. Gallen Mafia, who was based in Switzerland, is behind.
St. Gallen.
St. Gallen, yes. And it's there from this group of priests, which includes various Jesuits. The Jesuits have been taken over by the liberal agenda, as I said, and the Second Vatican Council has been taken over also by a specific form of Freemasonry, which is Satanic. The Grand Orient of France in 1877 renounced to God. It became the playground of all the leaders of the future Soviet Union. That's how 5 centuries nearly after, 4 centuries at that point, after the first Black Mass in France, this evil, this Satanism is pervading the French society, manifesting the Grand Orient of France that renounces to God and forces their own Freemasons to renounce to God. At that point, they become irregular. The United Lodge of England doesn't recognize them anymore. It explodes this big war between the two forms of Freemasonry, this liberal form and this more conservative one. But when the Second Vatican Council starts with the Pope Roncalli and then later on Pope Montini, they were both Masons and they were both connected to the Grand Orient of France. And it was the Grand Orient of France that infiltrated the Second Vatican Council with the Satanists and with the whole show and with the KGB agent, with this whole charade of things, because it was never meant to be neither Roncalli or Montini the Pope, really. The real Pope was elected was Cardinal Siri, but Siri was condemned he was elected as Pope. There is even a name. He even had a name as Pope ready. But the fact he had helped the Nazis escape through the rat lines didn't go down well with this whole thing. So he was put aside. You have to understand there has been a lot of compromises between Nazism and Catholicism. Okay? And the fact that a lot of SS members and leading Nazi figures were able to escape to Argentina, where the Pope is from, was because of the Vatican. Because of the Vatican issuing passports for them, the Knights of Malta, the Red Cross, and the whole show. I'm not saying that, as I said, Nazism and communism are ideologies that I think are most evil, both of them.
But it's all connected, right?
Yeah, they're all connected to certain lodges, to certain groups, like the Thule Gesellschaft in Germany in 1919, who gave birth to Nazism with Rudolf von Bottendorf, that then became like this occult mentor of Adolf Hitler. They have destroyed all the various royal imperial families because the Illuminati wanted to destroy them. Because in the plan of the Illuminati of Adam Weishaupt, destroy all the monarchies in Europe. And in the end, we only have the British monarchy, which of course was behind the whole thing from the start. And it's like very happy to be the only ones who, are in place.
So who is the head? Who is the head of the Illuminati today, or the so-called Illuminati? Is that the Pope or the British monarchy, or is it a figure, somebody we don't know that's kept away from public attention?
No, it's the Queen as a leading figure, as well as the Pope, as well as the Jesuit general, because as I said, they are two different figures. Then this Pope, of course, as we said, is a Jesuit, but we don't know now if the Jesuits are going to put also for the next Pope another Jesuit. I think this has been an emergency situation in regards to the Jesuits taking the papacy, a little bit like when the Soviet Union fall and they didn't know what to do, and Russia was in a complete state of chaos, and a guy called Vladimir Putin was picked up from the KGB to become the president. This is Pope Francis. It's the same kind of figure. So he comes from a background that is not traditionally the background of popes, because no pope has ever been a Jesuit. So the fact that the Jesuits have always been in charge of the military arm of the intelligence of the Vatican. Now, at the moment, for example, we had a woman dying only a couple of days ago called Nastasia Jait. I don't know if you heard about it.
Who was that?
She was a famous model and media personality in Argentina. She denounced that there was a massive pedophile ring connected to Pope Francis, and she was found dead for an apparent drug overdose in her house.
Wow.
I think that in this situation here, the people have to understand what is wrong with our world, where are we heading to, what is the problem, the main problem. The main problem is they want to take control of robotics and artificial intelligence more than anything else, because once they have that, they have the whole system under their control. They can eliminate 3/4 of the population because they don't need that population anymore.
But if there is a God the way that it's being described in the Holy Scriptures, why would that God allow all of these horrific and terrible things to happen in the world? And also all of these things to take place behind the scenes?
Because there has always been a point in which you have to understand that we come from, if you want to see a Christian point of view in the whole thing, or at least a biblical point of view, it can be also Jewish.
Well, if you believe in religion, there are so many ways to practice religion, and why is one thing more correct than the other?
We start from Adam and Eve, and, that's symbolic, and biting the apple and basically deciding to sin, and then the whole thing is going back to God after you've been casted out in a way from that direct contact.
But why does it happen if there is a loving God?
That is, it's symbolic. The loving God is not so loving when you go in the Old Testament, because Moses came down and got pissed off and the whole thing went to hell.
But the Bible is a story, right? Is that it's written in symbolism, or is some of it true, or is it just fiction? What is your opinion on that?
No. Here we are talking about the New Testament, the Old Testament, when you say Bible usually, So there's always a bit of confusion. When it comes down to the Old Testament, well, you are witnessing something that is historic, of course, and that is teaching you the fact that God, or at least this God, this Elohim, was manifested, this alien God, has privileged, for some reason, the Jewish population, the Israel, to accomplish this mission for the end times. We can say even that Adolf Hitler had a mission, because without him we probably will not have the state of Israel. If we want to go through paradoxes and get the ultimate answer, Adolf Hitler was himself partly Jewish. But then we have the fact that a lot of people, I hate this anti-Semitism and this, there is a lot of anti-Zionism that is becoming anti-Semitism these days. And this is creating a lot of problems, also credibility for people like us who want to denounce the powers to be. There is corruption in the Jewish and in the Zionist, of course.
It's very important to stress and underline that it has nothing to do with the Jewish people as a people.
Absolutely. And I see that there is this big problem that Jewish people are suffering more and more, because there is this increased anti-Semitism. I can say that this increased anti-Semitism, by the rule of the Illuminati, divide and conquer, now is the moment in which if you let in a bunch of Muslims into Europe, it becomes anti-Semitic. The Muslims are anti-Semitic.
But why do we need religions that preach shame, sin, and a lot of fear, which is part of the control system?
Well, yeah, absolutely, because you can't have chaos without order. Okay, so I'm not saying that the system of Christianity is the best of the universe, but has guaranteed for the Western world the possibility for you and me to talk freely, to be able to publish these books and to have a relatively good life. Compare it with the other parts of the world where they have those religions which are really instead, apart from the fact that of course we have other religions, we have always talked in this show about the Abrahamic religions, but we have of course then the Hindu, we have the Buddhist, we have many other faiths, the animist, and the animists, for example, understand deep in the heart of Africa what is happening today, because they have a very good knowledge of the spirits that activate the fire, the nuclear. They have the mindset, some of them, that we don't really even realize, because there is offshoots of the Egyptian faith, of the ancient Egyptians, that still are practiced in Africa.
But don't you think it's more important for people to become aware of their own abilities, that they are an infinite, amazing entity on this planet.
You see, that is the thing. That's the Illuminati have made this plan to make you believe you are your own God. That's it. And that's the moment you are failing.
We're not part of a universal energy.
We are part of an empire. Jesus is in this empire, but we are fundamentally part of an empire. The universe is a little bit like Star Wars. You have an emperor, you have the whole show.
But do you believe in this empire? Do you believe that's a good thing? Don't you think we should be free of this slavery?
There is no way of the freedom like you are portraying will lead only to you being possessed or at least misled by these forces that will manipulate you.
Don't you think that's fear-mongering?
You just wait and see. They are the Trojan horse of the Jesuits. They're being used to implement the one-world religion. They don't have the same values as me and you. Me and you have the values of being able to discuss if this is blue, that is white. No. For them is only one value. And they are there with the Sharia imposing it because they are used as Trojan horse for the one-world religion of the Jesuits and of Pope Francis.
So do you believe in the New World Order in the way that they are making this enormous conflict between the Western world and the so-called Muslim world?
It's all built, it's all a conflict that is being orchestrated and is now actually coming kind into the light when, I've been predicting for many years, but now people have seen hand in hand the Pope in Abu Dhabi with the Prince, the Imam head of... Finally, they're seeing that what I'm saying is true. When I said 10 years ago that there were 40 cardinals that secretly converted to Islam, they are ready to, in any moment, switch to another religion. I want you to understand that it's not a question of Islam being negative here. The question is Islam is being used because we don't believe anymore in the Bible, so they will use Islam or any other book that will work. Okay? When, for example, they made the MK Ultra experiments, they experimented with LSD, but then at one point they saw that they could get much better results with the Quran.
But isn't it the same whether it's the Bible or the Quran? Or it has to do with how great the evolution is and the information flow, right?
No.
Speaking of freedom of speech, you just mentioned that now we can have this conversation and we have the ability to agree and to disagree or anything else. But just recently, in fact the other day, we witnessed David Icke, that we just talked about, being banned from entering Australia so that he can no longer speak in Australia, and he had to cancel his tour that was sold out in Australia. Are we witnessing now that truth researching and talking freely, what we said freedom of speech, is being compromised?
Yeah, I haven't talked about my own case, but I am under a court trial here in Italy, and I'm under persecution in the sense that I don't know if I would. They want to shut my freedom of speech. They are suing me for somebody I wrote in Volume 1 against members of the P2 belonging to a certain obedience of Freemasons. With all the evidence and everything in place, the court wouldn't hear it, and they are actually, in end of May, I might really have even my passport taken or even been arrested. This is a situation in Italy where the 'Ndrangheta, working together with which is the most feared mafia from Calabria, working with the Freemason in the south of Italy, the regular Freemasonry, and the Vatican, is trying to shut me up. But I had threats left, right, and center made to me, to my family. My books have been picked up from each for bookshop in Italy 4 years ago when I went into the political arena, and they were completely taken off the shelves in the last 3 years. Now you can't find books. I can't go. I used to be a regular on Italian TV, on Berlusconi's channels, Italia Uno, Mistero. I am no longer allowed to be on any channel in Italy after I criticized the Italian president because I revealed who was behind this whole thing. When, for example, these days a lot of conservative or right-wing forces look at Russia as the great answer for all the problems because Vladimir Putin is such a man and the whole thing, I tend to disagree. Because I tell them, listen, guys, it doesn't work that way. I've been in Russia a million times. I know Russia back. I've been working with the Russian Federation also. So, I mean, I've done events like for the children victims of terrorism in 2002 in Bolshoi. But what I can tell you is this. The communists, the Soviet Union are still there. They are playing both.
Have you changed your opinion about politics and the political system? And do you believe that Trump was put in the position to either take down or challenge the New World Order, or is he part of the New World Order strategy to impose a one world government on the world and part of the whole thing as well?
I was part of the Trump elections because I am the president of Italians for Trump. I endorsed Trump.
But why do you believe that Trump is any different, even though he's a loudmouth?
If I had the billions Trump had, I would do exactly what he's doing. I don't unfortunately have those billions, and unfortunately today money talks. While 100 years ago, people will listen to the great ideologists of politics, of the left, of the right, and they were all people who were from modest origins. They didn't have much money. Today, unfortunately, to do politics, you have to have billions. And to be independent means that Obama now is a prostitute who for 70 million for his next book has already sold the whole of the world and more. These people are prostitutes because they don't have their own money. They're slaves. They're slaves because anybody hands the money. Politicians are just like objects that, they can buy. You can't buy a billionaire. So I believe in the fact that Trump is a billionaire doing his own thing. He might have his faults, but he's much better than a bunch of idiots, charlatans, and people who for a couple of millions for a book deal will sell their own mother or the future of the planet. That's it.
Will the Illuminati that you have exposed today and other elite groups and the New World Order, would they ever allow anybody, any independent millionaire, billionaire, to have this position of power at all if he wasn't being played as a puppet?
Trump is on another side of the Illuminati, the side I've been working with, which is fortunately growing bigger and bigger because we are more and more. There is more Freemasons who are on my side than there were 10 years ago. Definitely I was alone when I started all this in 2006. I'm not anymore. I tend to think one thing. Why is it that all these left-wing forces don't want to hear anything about what I say or conspiracy?
But why are we still talking about left-wing, right-wing? Why is that still a topic?
Because the New World Order wants to build a communistic vision. That's why we're saying, because the vision, the left-wing vision of all being the same that you are describing is the vision that is creating the problem in the first place. And until you will not have a revelation from above, the Republicans are all corrupt just as the Democrats. I believe in Trump because people believe in Trump aside from the politics. We don't care about the Republican Party. George Bush was the biggest crook. George Bush Jr. is the biggest, William, however you call him. And then Clinton, they're all together. Now, we have seen how they acted when George Bush died.
A lot of people have been exposing for years that all of those political figures, left wing, right wing, or everything is working together. But why not Trump?
But I believe that Trump, as well as other people in Europe who are waking up, but I prefer this kind of solution, that the solution that is imposed by the globalists of a technocrat, soulless Europe, driven by these technocrats with their glasses, the glassholes look like Nazis. They are sons of Nazis, all of them, people collaborated with the Nazis. I think that the future of this planet will be changed in the next 10 years, not so much by all these ideologies that are really old news, but by artificial intelligence. And so the moment in which artificial intelligence comes into place, and they have already prohibited to follow up on the experiments when it comes down to the release of this new software where the artificial intelligence was capable of writing books. They said, no, it's too dangerous. Imagine that. It's too dangerous.
And 5G that they're putting up everywhere now, right?
Absolutely. I have a whole chapter of 5G in my new book, because it is the way in which they're gonna get inside our brains, is the way in which they will know if we are in the bathroom, in the living room, downstairs, upstairs, eating this, eating that. How much energy are we consuming? Are we consuming the amount of energy we are allowed? No, yes, no.
But Leo, how can we fight this artificial intelligence?
Well, you see, the actual antennas of the 5G are a big problem health-wise, but there is ways that are being experimented by some scientists these days to create some substances that can basically protect us from this external invasion, which is physical. It's not spiritual. Here we're talking about physical and electromagnetic, so
frequencies. Yes,
frequencies. So I think that there is going to be a number of people, and I already spoke with some. One of them is Sasha Stone, for example. He's working with a group of scientists on a project, but I had a lot of other people who are working on various projects. Others simply want to go and live like I do, on top of a mountain, far away from every antenna. But that's not the solution, because in the end 5G is going to get to you, because there's always going to be some idiot who's going to have his 5G on, and with 5G everything becomes an antenna. You are part of this grid that goes around the world, and that ultimately serves cyber Satan. You have to go back to a movie that was released in 1981. It's called Evil Speak. This movie describes a guy who went to military school. He evokes the Satan on a primitive form of computer. I mean, it was 1981, but it was already a Mac. I think he had a Mac too. And he gets in contact with Satan, and he evokes Satan through this Latin, this grimoire, and so on. And so that is already a prophecy, because that that film was one of Anton LaVey's favorite films, and it's like a prophecy, and it's a film that actually has been censored during the 80s. So then it came out again, uncensored, an extended version many years later. I would suggest people to watch it, because it includes some elements already of how this cyber Satan is there, is in front of us. We are exceeding it. In my book here, in the 666 that you have here, if you actually look very close, you will see a www.
Well, we can't really see that on the screen there because of the lighting. But
it's very small. It's www, because of course the mark of the beast is next. Microchipping. Within 10 years from now, 15 years, Robocops will come to our doors. Will knock. Say, you are microchip? No. Okay. And they are Robocops. You can't. Like I said the other day even to my friends in America, who of course have a lot of weapons and stuff. I said, okay, but if a Robocop shows up to your door, you can't do anything about it. I mean, you can have an AK-47, and the Robocop is still gonna. And there's this new form of tattoo which they're gonna use for the microchipping, which is already been experimented and is working already. So we're gonna be victims of this forced globalization, which is gonna inoculate the mark of the beast, and that's a prophecy that becomes fact.
And we don't have a solution right now to what we can actually do.
The solution was given to you 2,000 years ago, but if you forget it, of course, as a Danish, you can forget it. You can decide. I might decide to forget it because I prefer maybe to listen to some other guru on the other side of the planet. No, we have to understand that the solution was already given to us, and in this book, I actually published the solution, and it's the rite of exorcism of the Catholic Church, untouched before 1999, because the Catholic Church has revised the rite of exorcism in 1999 as the last of the ceremonies that was reformed after the Second Vatican Council, so they could diminish its power. And at that point, it doesn't work anymore, because you are cuddling the demon, you're not exorcising him. I think that people who are watching me should go and maybe research Father Malachi Martin. Understand that in 1963 there was a black mass in St. Peter's. Understand that these people are Satanists, and understand that Satan is taking over the world through technology, through cyber Satan, not through some old hocus pocus grimoire read in some underground cave. No, it's done in Silicon Valley.
So what is the brief solution to a solution that is much, much, much more complex?
For me, it's the way of the heart and the way of having faith in... I personally have faith. I have faith, and I will never be microchipped. I said that 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago on Project Camelot, in 2007, whenever, and I want to re-say it again. I will never be microchipped, and that means in 10 years from now being in a warfare, because they will come hunting us down. They will come hunting us down, but we will not give ourselves up peacefully. This is going to become a warfare.
Please tell us a little bit about your books. How many books have you written, and how can people learn more about you and your website?
Books I written, I don't know. Here I have only the last two, volume 5 and volume 6.66, which I have talked about extensively today. And also volume 5 is important, because volume 5 is the decline of the West and the rise of Satanism in our society. These two books fit with what I've been talking about today. But then I have also The Invisible Master. I have the trilogy. I have written, I think I published over 20 books worldwide. I published books in Japan, in America, in Italy.
And can people purchase your book through your website?
Okay, what they can do is this. When it comes down to the 5 books on CCCC Publishing, which is Pope Francis the Last Pope ? The trilogy and Invisible Master, you can purchase that through any retailer in the US, Barnes & Noble, or you can go on Amazon, or you can go on any bookshops. It's in the bookshops. Well, instead, regarding these last two, which I showed you, these are published by Cursum Perficio, which is my wife's publishing house, and so you can get them on Amazon. And at times we do some extended distribution, at times we don't, but you can get them on Kindle or paperback form from Amazon. And regarding then people who speak other languages, of course, in Japan I published 6 books, and in Italy I published also around 10 books, and you can still get them if you order them, but or in specialized bookshops, but not anymore like it used. Imagine that in 2012 I had bookshops in Italy with whole sections of my books. And the fact that you are censored, I think, is good. It means that you have touched on something they don't like you to show. So, I mean, you are saying something that is not agreed by the system.
So people, if they want more information about you, please mention your website.
LeoZagami.com. LeoZagami.com is the place where daily, or at least a few times a week, you have my controversial articles, you can find my interviews and so on. And of course, it's a way of keeping in direct contact with me without any censorship. I'm glad that you in Scandinavian Denmark today are able to do the Age of Truth, and I'm glad that I was able to talk with you today. So thank you so much for having me on, and it was a pleasure to talk with you. Very much.
It was absolutely wonderful, and it was very controversial, mind-blowing, and extraordinary. And it will be wonderful to have you back on the show some other time.
Absolutely. I want people to agree with me. I'm just telling my perception of things, and the way I have lived my life and I perceive things is, of course, is my own.
Well, it's certainly been absolutely incredible and very remarkable to hear your extraordinary story. And we want to thank you very much, Leo Zagami, for doing this interview for Age of Truth TV. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Age of Truth. God bless you.
Thank you. We appreciate that very much. If you like our shows, please hit the bell, subscribe to our channel, like our videos, and if you want to support us, you can click onto our website, ageoftruth.tv. Your support is greatly appreciated, and thank you for watching. We'll see you again.